Tonight we're going to be talking about gene-environment interactions, as was mentioned, and a functional medicine approach to really dealing with people that are sensitive to particular chemicals and toxins. Before I delve into the topic, I will disclose that I'm a medical advisor for Pure Encapsulations and I have no other conflicts of interest to disclose. So tonight we're going to talk about some common chemicals and key genes that are involved in detoxification, as well as some lifestyle, nutrient and supplement recommendations to help support detoxification, particularly for those who are more vulnerable because perhaps they've inherited sensitivities or susceptibilities, or they're exposed to a high toxic load. So exposures, yes, looking at the world around us, we definitely know, and I'm definitely grateful to work in this space with people like you at Spectra and Prima. I'm involved with an organisation, ACNM, the Australian College of Nutrition and Environmental Medicine, where we teach people, about the impacts of, environmental chemicals, plastics, pollutions, what they do to our hormones, our fertility, our health. And I'm happy to be part of this space and spreading this message, and hopefully the world around us will start to clean up and not look like this, because it's not just the planet, it's our health and that of all the animals and species around us. So the last 100 years has given rise to a rapid expansion in the chemical industry, and we all know, I don't need to focus too much here, they've affected our food, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and many of these are potentially harmful. When it comes to the main chemicals and toxins, the World Health Organization has highlighted 10. Now, this could be really a much more extensive list, but this is what the WHO has put out that really are the main concerns for the public. And the two that I'm going to be discussing tonight, I'll be touching on benzene, which interestingly in the Philippines last month in October, you have just tightened up your regulations around benzene. So you are now prohibiting the importation of paints and glues and other things with a certain level of benzene. So that's only just happened now in October 2022. But obviously still exposure is an issue. And the other one I'll touch on is arsenic. And I'll also be talking about the genes involved in detoxification, but just know that the genetics that I'll talk about aren't just involved in these particular chemicals and heavy metals. They are involved in really looking at or dealing with other chemicals and toxins in the environment as well. So when I mention detoxification, I'm really talking about the process that happens mainly in the liver. So it is possible that biotransformation of chemicals and toxins can happen in other tissues, such as the gut or even a little bit in the lungs, the breast, things like that. But predominantly detoxification or the biotransformation of potentially harmful substances, even endogenous chemicals like hormones, but other environmental pollutants and things like that, it mainly occurs in the liver. And that process involves phase 1 detoxification. If you can see my mouse, I'm sort of circling that there. Over on the left, we've got phase 1, and that's really driven by cytochrome P450 enzymes. So those enzymes are coded for the genes that are called cytochrome P450 genes. And basically, we inherit variations in these cytochrome P450s, and some of us can metabolize certain things at a much faster rate and some of us at a slower rate. So if I'm just to give you an example of caffeine, that's a common one that people know about if they're thinking about fast or slow metabolizers and these enzymes. Some people have a genetic variation in cytochrome P451A2, and some people have the ability to metabolize caffeine quickly. They can tolerate higher amounts of caffeine, whereas other people inherit a slight change and they don't clear it as quickly. They can be a bit more sensitive. They might get palpitations. They might not be able to sleep so well. They might get a bit anxious. And it's really the same with other chemicals and toxins too. Some of us have the ability to metabolize these things more efficiently and clear them from the body, whereas others may not. So I've just mentioned phase 1, but phase 2 is really important. And from a functional medicine perspective, those of you who've done, training with IFM or looking at functional medicine, you would definitely be familiar with these pathways, thinking about glutathione conjugation or amino acid conjugation, methylation, glucuronidation. This is basically a process where we have either a glutathione molecule that's added on to a metabolite. So if I just step back quickly, some of you may know this, but for those of you who are sort of new to learning about phase 1 or phase 2 detox or haven't heard about it for a while, I'll just remind you that with phase 1, this is sort of step 1 in that biotransformation or detoxification process. Phase 1 is step 1, but it actually often makes a more reactive metabolite or a more reactive compound that's potentially more dangerous than even the initial compound. So whether that's alcohol or benzene or an estrogen molecule, when we have these metabolites, they become more reactive. They can do cell damage, potentially even, DNA damage. So we have these intermediate metabolites. So phase 2 is really important. We want to conjugate those metabolites so that they are less reactive, less harmful, and also water soluble, because many environmental toxins and chemicals are fat soluble, hormones and things like that. So we want to change the molecular composition so that they're less harmful, so that they're water soluble and they can be excreted. And that's done through these pathways, which is driven by particular enzymes and require particular nutrients. So some people might inherit certain variations that mean they're a bit slower at phase 2, perhaps not clearing some of these chemicals and toxins so well, but also those that have nutrient deficiencies will be more sensitive to chemicals and toxins because these are needed for the liver to function properly and for that detoxification process. So when we think about detoxification and the variability and why some people are more chemically sensitive, and when I say chemically sensitive, I'm talking about your patients that come in and say, they're smelling perfumes and they're getting a headache, or they're putting something on their skin, they're getting rashes. They're reacting to things. They've generally got a high toxic load. They're not clearing things well, or they've had an exposure to a high amount of chemicals and toxins. So the ability to detoxify and how sensitive someone will be to chemicals and toxins depends on the genes, the exposure to various compounds, the levels of exposure, their dietary intake, because they need those nutrients for the liver and organs to function properly, their overall health, if they've got any medical conditions. Obviously, their gut health is important too. Detoxification happens in the gut as well. Their lifestyle, are they under high stress? Are they sleeping? A lot of that repair, clearing, regeneration happens when we sleep. Are they exercising, moving their body, getting the nutrients around, clearing things out? And can they remove their wastes? Are they constipated? They may not even be eliminating their wastes. And it's really the interaction between all of these things that influence the ability for detoxification. So if someone does come in and they are, they're having symptoms, whether it be headaches, rashes, food sensitivities, possibly even sensitive sometimes to even supplements, medications, they are becoming, almost feeling like the world around them is poisoning them. We really need to be addressing many, many factors in that functional medicine approach. The first chemical that I want to talk about is benzene, and benzene is a problem all over the world and probably still is a big problem in the Philippines, though thankfully it will change for you soon because, as I said, in October last month, this year, 2022, the regulations have changed around benzene. So with benzene, the exposures come from breathing in fuel emissions. So if you're living in, a busy place that's got lots of traffic, then you could be breathing in lots of, benzene there. Tobacco smoke, and then the vapors from household items like paints, adhesives, rubber, glues, things like that. And it's the paints and things like that that contain high amounts of benzenes will no longer be able to come into the Philippines, which is good. And so if you're in places like Manila, then you're probably going to be exposed to quite a high amount of benzene too, just in that outside air. So a number of studies indicate that benzene toxicity is dependent on metabolic activation and detoxification of the genes, including CYP, so that's a cytochrome P450, a phase 1 enzyme, CYP2E1, CYP1B1, as well as phase 2 enzymes, GSTs, they're called glutathione transferases, and NQO1 or quinone reductase is a really important enzyme, which I have mentioned a little bit with you before if you've come along to other talks, but we'll talk a bit more in detail tonight. So I won't go through this in detail. There's lots on the slide, but the main thing to know is that when benzene is breathed in, let's say you're breathing it in from, from car exhaust fumes or from paint or wherever, it then gets converted in the body to certain things, phenols and hydroquinones. Now, these can be cleared through glutathione conjugation, glucuronidation, etc. But there is the potential for them to be converted into semiquinones and, more importantly, or more dangerously, the benzoquinones. So benzoquinones are highly reactive. They are associated with DNA damage as well as risk for cancers. So NQO1, which is the enzyme here, is actually really important in that it can convert benzoquinones back to a less harmful quinone, to those hydroquinones. So the benzoquinones can either go off and do damage, or they can be converted with NQO1 if someone's got a functioning NQO1 enzyme. And it doesn't show it here, but glutathione transferases can also, you can use glutathione to sort of quench this. And so it's not just the NQO1. So quinone reductase converts these harmful quinones, like I said, the benzoquinones. And if you do work in the hormone space, you're probably aware, or if you do Dutch testing, that estrogens can also be converted into quinones. And it's the estrogen quinones that cause DNA damage and linked with breast cancers. So they're the same things. We've got benzoquinones, estrogen quinones, other forms of quinones. They're very reactive, very dangerous compounds. So these quinones can come from benzenes, tobacco smoke, as I mentioned, the estrogens, and the NQO1 converts them back to a less harmful substance. It also decreases the formation of free radicals, and NQO1 also converts ubiquinone, so that's CoQ10, into ubiquinol, the active form. And it also converts vitamin E, tocopherol quinone, into the active alpha tocopherol, so the vitamin E as well. So not only is it helping with sort of the detoxification of benzenes, it's acting as an antioxidant with CoQ10 and vitamin E. So the things that actually upregulate, turn on NQO1 in our body, so cause that gene to be turned on and for the enzyme to be expressed, is exposure to quinones, free radicals, heavy metals, and radiation. And we know that NQO1, as I said, can detoxify quinones. It can act as an antioxidant, and it's also been shown to be a P53 stabilizer. So really important when we think of it from an anti-cancer perspective as well. So there is a genetic variation within the NQO1, and that's shown up here. And I know that some of you over there in the Philippines and also in Hong Kong have done genetic testing, and I've looked at your results. And even if you haven't done genetic testing with like health providers, even if you've done 23andMe and Ancestry, you can pull this information and find this SNP. So it's the T allele. So normal is a C, and then the variant is a T. And just to step back, when I say, C's and T's, I'm talking about the DNA bases, what you inherit from your parents, your DNA. So A, T, C, and G, we've got those 4 letters. That's what makes up our DNA, our genes and codes for all of us. So in this case, if someone has a T allele in the NQO1, this means that it's actually very unstable, it's rapidly degraded, and really there's not a lot of enzyme activity. It doesn't function well. It doesn't have the ability to bind to the cofactor as efficiently, and that is FAD, which requires riboflavin. So B2 is really important for this. And studies have shown that if someone has the TT, so they've inherited a T from mum and dad, and they've got that homozygote variant, basically the enzyme is undetectable and there is an absence of enzyme activity. And studies have shown that the general population with that SNP and being exposed to benzenes are much more sensitive to benzene toxicities, the development of cancers, and people that work as taxi drivers or petrol station employees that are exposed to a lot of car exhaust fumes and benzenes are particularly susceptible. So as I've mentioned, there are factors that can turn on NQO1, so exposures to quinones and stresses. So it's highly inducible under a variety of stress responses. It's mediated by that NRF2. So things that trigger NRF2 will trigger the production or the turning on, the expression of NQO1 in the body. Methylation is important. And something to note is age. As we age, our levels of NQO1, this is the enzyme that's going to, help us with clearing sort of these benzene quinones and potentially harmful compounds. As we get older, we have less of this in the body. And they've actually shown through a yeast model study that overexpression extends both chronological age and the lifespan of those yeasts. So really important for healthy aging. Things that can help with increasing the levels are caloric restriction. This increases levels in the liver and the brain. And then the other thing that I wanted to share with you, which I haven't shared with you before, for those of you who I have spoken with and you do have, you've got this NQO1 SNP, what I know now is that vitamin B2 can actually restore enzyme activity. So FAD is the cofactor, and actually I've got a chemical structure here on the right. So this is what the NQO1 enzyme looks like, and FAD is this cofactor. And if someone has plenty of FAD, plenty of riboflavin, that can actually bind, or that's going to stimulate the binding and can restore NQO1 activity. So up until recently, I thought if you had that TT variant, then you're just going to be much more susceptible to the estrogen quinones, benzoquinones, other quinones. But we now know that that B2 can restore activity. So this is quite an old paper back from the year 2000 by Bruce Ames. I'm sorry, I should have the reference on the bottom there, but it's Bruce Ames. If you look him up and look up, this is the name of the paper, High Dose Vitamins and Coenzymes. So Bruce Ames is really one of the fathers of nutrigenomics and nutritional medicine, personalized medicine. So he does a lot with epigenetics, personalized health. He's from the US, and my supervisor, Michael Fennick, would really be the guru in this area of nutrition and genetics, personalized medicine in Australia. So I met Bruce many years ago, probably over 20 years ago now, when I was doing my PhD, and he was claiming quite a long time ago. So this was about, this paper was from the year 2000, so 22 years ago, but showing that FAD can help with NQO1, even MTHFR. We know that FAD is the cofactor for MTHFR. And in this paper, he suggests giving 100 milligrams of riboflavin. Now, a lot of this is cell culture work. You can show that you can increase enzyme activity. I haven't seen any studies with humans giving that much. I don't know if we absorb that much. I don't know if that much would increase enzyme activity. But we do have studies with MTHFR, or methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, which is important for folate metabolism. Some studies a few years ago showing that increasing vitamin B2 for those with the SNP, that's linked with slower enzyme activity, increases MTHFR reduces homocysteine, and actually reduced high blood pressure in those with the MTHFR SNP. So we do have some human trials with the B2 showing it's beneficial with this, but none to my knowledge with NQO1. So personally, I don't give that much B2. I don't give 100 milligrams. I tend to give more B complexes a little bit, but just keeping this on our radar and seeing if we get more research to see. And if any of you do give high dose B2, let me know. But at this stage, I don't. This is very much, as I said, cell culture and hypothetical. So when it comes to other phase 2 detox enzymes, the glutathione transferases are probably some of the most important. They're all important, but with the glutathione transferases, they're involved in helping clear many different chemicals and toxins, xenobiotics, heavy metals, hormones, quinones, all sorts of things. And there are multiple types of glutathione transferases, such as the GST M1, T1, and P1, and they're called MT and P for mu, theta, and pi. So in some cases, people actually have deletions. They don't have these genes, and about 50% don't have the GST M1, glutathione transferase M1, and about 25% of people don't have the GST T1. So I do a lot of genetic testing. I'm obviously a geneticist. And I have to say, when I see people that are missing both of these glutathione transferases, just my clinical observation, I do see that they are generally more sensitive to chemicals and toxins. And many studies have demonstrated the difference in susceptibility with these deletions to exposures in regard to environmental pollutants, variability in drug response, and health outcomes. So there are some suggestions that there are other genes that will compensate if you do not have those GST enzymes. And even if you don't have these deletions, there are other glutathione transferases. It doesn't mean that you won't go through that glutathione conjugation pathway at all, but it may not be happening as effectively as someone who has, additional enzymes doing that. So GST-P1, this is not a deletion. This is a variation that affects how fast or slow. And this is something that is not located in the liver like most of the other enzymes. So most of the glutathione transferases are predominantly found in the liver, whereas GST-P1 is found in the brain, the lungs, and the breast. So another important one in relation to hormone metabolism too. And there have been quite a few studies linking that this SNP in association with increased susceptibility to chemicals and toxins, particularly when it comes to respiratory disorders, and a lot of research in relation to asthma with this SNP as well. And some studies actually suggest that people that have genetic variations within GSTs and the deletions may benefit from more vitamin C because they tend to use up their vitamin C quicker. Now, we don't completely know the mechanism, but it's likely that these people have more free radicals, more oxidative stress because they're not able to sort of detox as efficiently, and vitamin C is likely to be stepping in and acting as an antioxidant because we know that glutathione is also an antioxidant. So speaking about antioxidants, there are three main antioxidant enzymes, the predominant endogenous antioxidant enzymes, and this is superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. And these really are what convert really the main free radicals, so superoxide into hydrogen peroxide, and then into water and oxygen. So totally neutralizing and clearing free radicals. So with superoxide dismutase, the minerals that are required are manganese for the superoxide dismutase located in the mitochondria, and then the superoxide dismutase found in other within the cells, outside the cells, require copper and zinc. Glutathione peroxidase requires selenium, and you've probably heard that selenium is an antioxidant, and that's because it's the cofactor for this glutathione peroxidase. So it's a cofactor for this antioxidant. And this is what we call a selenoprotein. And if people are low in selenium, regardless of their genetic variability, if you're low in selenium, glutathione peroxidase won't function as well. Just like if you've got NQO1 or MTHFR, if you're low in vitamin B2, they won't function as well. You need to have these cofactors. So we're thinking about the genes and the nutrients. And obviously exposure. If someone has a high exposure to free radicals because they're smoking cigarettes, drinking lots of alcohol, or living in a polluted city, that are exposed for whatever reason because of their career, their job, we definitely want to be supporting them with, minerals and nutrients and things like that to compensate for those exposures. So moving on to arsenic. Arsenic is found in the air, soil, and water. The major contamination is from water, and the second most common source is rice. Now, I do believe that the Philippines doesn't have such a big issue with arsenic in rice anymore. Back in 2012, Australia set a very sort of strict limit with looking at levels of arsenic. And at that time, I think the Philippines still had issues with arsenic in the water and in some of the rice. But I believe that, and you probably be more aware, yeah, on top of that now. I was actually trying before this talk to find out about levels of arsenic in rice in the Philippines and couldn't really find much information, but it does seem to be that the rice now doesn't have, the same issues. But within Southeast Asia, it's more common for arsenic to be found in the rice. There are exposures and elevated levels because of mining and pesticide use, and chronic exposure is linked with health disorders. And individuals who are chronically exposed can have levels very high for a really, really long time. It can be hard to clear. When it comes to clearing arsenic, methylation is important. And we've already done a few talks on methylation. We know that's our folate and B vitamins. If you do genetic testing or you've had your genes done, look at those genes linking with methylation. If you have a genetic variation in MTHFR or some of the other SNPs, that can influence methylation, and that's what's important for clearing arsenic. So we talked about these phase 2 detoxification pathways. We know that glutathione conjugation is a major one, but if we're thinking about arsenic, we really want to think about methylation and supporting that pathway. Smokers who are likely to have higher benzene, as I mentioned before, are also more likely to have higher levels of arsenic. And sadly, studies have shown that as pregnant women progress through their pregnancy, they show lower arsenic. And we actually know this is not just with arsenic. When a woman is pregnant, she does pass on a lot of that chemical and toxic load onto the fetus and the baby. Selenium is a trace element that can decrease arsenic by binding and supporting excretion. So with selenium and a lot of these minerals, they can actually displace some of these more toxic heavy metals like arsenic. So we know with mercury, zinc can be really good at displacing mercury and reducing levels. And when it comes to arsenic, selenium can be beneficial. The other SNP to think about is GSTP1, that glutathione transferase, because that can play a role in heavy metal detoxification as well. So what do we need to do? The most important thing is minimizing exposure. But the reality is, if you're living in a city and it's all around you, you then need to start thinking about putting the good things in to compensate. So thinking about, the level of traffic around you, industrial exposures, off-gassing from, furnitures, paints, glues, things like that, molds. I've put plants there. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but one of the best things you can do is, have lots of plants around, because they actually, take in the benzene, they take in a lot of these environmental pollutants and actually clean the air for you. And of course, aside from plants, you can actually get, air filters and things as well. Thinking about clean food, with less pesticides, things like that, water, and the things that you're consuming daily, that you're putting on your skin, that your self-care products. Quit smoking would definitely be advised for our patients, and limiting alcohol and drugs and medications can also contain a lot of chemicals and toxins as well. So not only do we want to minimize the exposure, we also just want to make sure that we're clearing these things, because we do have a liver, we do have, you know, kidneys and our gut and all of these things working with us to try to help our body transform these things so that we can clear them. But we need to be moving for that to happen. So think about physical activity. You know, saunas can help sweating things out, massage to get things moving, drinking plenty of water, which lots of people don't drink enough water, and then having a healthy diet with all the nutrients we need to support those enzymes for detoxification, and plenty of fiber so that we are using our bowels daily. So when it comes to overall diet, you know, protein, fiber, lots of antioxidants. If you think that your patient is suffering with sort of chemical sensitivities and having issues with the ability to handle environmental pollutants, studies have shown that those people that have the GSTM1 deletion, and remember it's about 50% of the population, if they have a low green leafy vegetable intake, they're likely to have higher DNA damage. However, those that had the highest green leafy vegetable intake actually had lower DNA damage, regardless of their SNP. So if you're eating lots of leafy greens, if you've got a really good diet, that can actually help you deal with those chemicals and toxins. Because if you think about leafy greens, what have they got? Folate. Folate helps with DNA repair, reducing DNA damage. Also, green leafies have got sulforaphane, which I'll talk about. So that triggers NRF2. That turns on detox enzymes like NQO1, glutathione transferases. So, you know, some of these bioactive compounds in our foods like sulforaphane, quercetin, resveratrol, things like that, they actually go in and talk to our DNA and turn on a whole host of antioxidant and detox enzymes. So cruciferous vegetables are really, really good for detoxification if people can tolerate them. If they're a bit sensitive, sometimes they might get bloating or pain. But if your patient can tolerate them, cruciferous veggies with that sulforaphane can ameliorate the effects of those that are more genetically susceptible. So we need to come in with the diet and possibly even supplements as well. So I definitely try to educate my patients around, you know, a diet that's going to support not just detoxification, but overall health. And then particular supplements as well. So even though we talk about cruciferous vegetables and leafy greens, and, you know, we definitely want to focus on having a healthy diet, the reality is with sulforaphane or some of these bioactive compounds that do have the potential to be very therapeutic and help clear things out of the body, often with food, we do need to eat quite a lot to get those therapeutic benefits. So with sulforaphane, the highest amount of the bioactive compounds are actually found in broccoli sprouts or broccoli seeds compared to the mature broccoli. So it's better to have the sprouts, or if you're getting a supplement, thinking about getting it from the broccoli sprout or from the seed, because the actual broccoli that we generally eat in our stir fries and things like that doesn't have as much. So it's been shown to help reduce DNA damage, reduce oxidative stress, and reduce inflammation. And really, we've known about this since the 1990s, that it's a potent cytoprotective compound, and even more recent studies still show that it's probably number one, or one of the most potent inducers, meaning sort of turning on the expression of those phase 2 detox enzymes that I was talking about. So when we think back to that liver at the start, where I said phase 1 and phase 2, and you've got all these pathways, you know, for amino acid conjugation, glucuronidation, glutathione conjugation, etc. Eating these kind of foods or getting these bioactive compounds stimulates all of those processes. So this is a study looking at giving sulforaphane as a supplement, and we can see before and after. If we're looking down here on the horizontal axis on the left, before and after with 3 capsules or 6 capsules. Overall, this is actually this is not a really high dose. It actually used glucoraphanin from the sulforaphane, and what we can see is that the glutathione transferase activity increased after the sulforaphane supplement was given. And the same thing, this bar graph in the middle, we can see that we've got NQO1, that important enzyme that converts those nasty quinones back to something less harmful. The NQO1 enzyme is increased when people are given sulforaphane as well. And this is just showing that there is an increase in both enzymes, the GST and the NQO1. And they're not the only enzymes, but they're definitely two of the major ones involved in detoxification. So aside from sulforaphane, when we're thinking about supporting detoxification for those that have got chemical sensitivities, you know, NAC and glutathione can be really helpful. I used to give NAC for probably the first 10 years of moving into sort of functional medicine. I gave NAC, and that's because it's the rate limiting substance for glutathione synthesis. So when we want to make glutathione, it's cysteine, glycine, and glutamine, 3 amino acids. And they need to come together in the liver to make glutathione. So early studies showed that glutathione wasn't absorbed well, and that it was broken down into the amino acids. And my mentor said to me that, you know, giving NAC is likely to be better because the glutathione is breaking down anyway. Plus, back then with NAC, and particularly from a fertility perspective, I do a lot in the fertility space, there were quite a few studies with NAC in children, you know, PCOS in the fertility space. So I was happier giving NAC. What happened last year, and I think a lot to do with COVID, is NAC went out of stock and I started giving glutathione. And I'm actually really happy with glutathione. I think I'm seeing better results. And we now know that there are better forms of glutathione, because as I said before, there was issues around absorption, particularly with the liposomal. So this is a study from the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2018, basically showing that oral supplementation with liposomal glutathione increases glutathione and also boosted immune function. So similar to NQO1, where levels go down as we age, glutathione also goes down as we age. So if we're getting older, we definitely want to be thinking about a bit of additional support, particularly if we're exposed to a high level of chemicals and toxins. And as I mentioned, the liver is the primary organ involved in glutathione synthesis. So if your patient has poor liver function, or they've got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now called metabolic fatty liver disease, think about giving glutathione, because if you give NAC, remember they've got to make that into the glutathione. So in these cases, I definitely think it's better to give glutathione. Also, if we are thinking about liver support, phosphatidylcholine is one of my favorites, and it has been shown to reduce non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I found out on the weekend. I was at a conference in Melbourne and I was told that it's now named metabolic alcoholic. It's no, not even alcoholic, non-alcoholic. I think it's metabolic fatty liver disease, sorry, is the new classification. Milk thistle can also be really helpful for the liver. And then methylation, because that is one of the phase 2 detox support pathways. And if you do think that someone has been exposed to arsenic, you find out that there is, whether it be the rice or, through pesticides or heavy metals, then definitely think about, the folate and the B vitamins. The other thing, as I said, is the minerals. The minerals are so important. Minerals are cofactors for hundreds of enzymes in the body, particularly for those antioxidant enzymes. And the antioxidant enzymes will not function as well if someone has mineral deficiency. And as I mentioned about the selenium that can displace and help sort of basically kick out the arsenic, and zinc that is known to displace and help bind and reduce mercury levels. There are, here we can see minerals also support heavy metal chelation, and quite a few studies there to have a look at. So vitamin C, as I said, if someone is missing those glutathione transferase enzymes, vitamin C requirements increase. And you've probably seen me present this slide before. At this stage, I haven't seen any studies comparing the different forms of glutathione, but we do have this study that compares the different forms of vitamin C. So looking at oral, liposomal, and IV. So in this study, they compared 4 grams, so a pretty high dose of vitamin C. And in all cases, whether it was oral, liposomal, or IV, they were well tolerated. There was no adverse effects. And if we look over on the right, the top right in the graph, we can see the dotted line with the triangle gives the highest amount of vitamin C, and that's the IV, no surprise. And it's really hard to differentiate at the bottom. But the graph below this, they've expanded that vertical axis, and we can clearly see here that it's the top one, so that dashed line with the black triangle, which is the liposomal, that does give the highest amount of vitamin C. So the open circle is just the oral vitamin C, standard oral, and then down here at the bottom, we've got the placebo, which we wouldn't expect to increase the vitamin C. The last nutrient I want to mention is CoQ10. And the reason I want to mention this is because I've brought up NQO1. I've told you how important NQO1 is for reducing those benzenes so they can't cause cellular and DNA damage. But NQO1, as I mentioned, also converts ubiquinone to ubiquinol, which is the active form of CoQ10. So if you are looking at your NQO1 results, and you do have a variation, you may want to think about increasing your CoQ10 levels. So CoQ10 is really known for supporting cellular energy, but it also acts as an antioxidant. And as I mentioned, those who inherit the genes, the SNP, may not convert that CoQ10 into the active form as well. So CoQ10 can function, if you're just looking over on the right, as an antioxidant. It's important for mitochondrial health, for healthy aging, autophagy, for the endocrine system, anti-apoptosis, for the immune system, but also from a fertility perspective, there are studies showing it can help with improving semen parameters. It's mentioned there with energy, but also cognition, and really from a healthy aging perspective. And similar to glutathione, CoQ10 levels do deplete and reduce as we age. So in summary, it's really our genes and our exposures and our lifestyle that makes us who we are, our phenotype. So if someone comes in and they are, expressing and showing signs of sensitivities to chemicals and toxins, they're telling you they are, they're struggling, they're breathing things in, or they're eating certain things, they're getting reactions, they're starting to get hives or rashes or, histamine things, struggling with breathing, migraines, headaches, whatever it may be, just feeling fatigued, brain fog. There can be a genetic component. They may be more genetically susceptible. But even if they are genetically susceptible, it's really the whole lifestyle factors, the exposures, the diet, the sleep that really come into play when it comes to, what they're expressing, their phenotype. So as I've mentioned, it's really important to reduce the exposure. But in some cases, if someone's living in a certain place or working in a certain place, it may be difficult to reduce that exposure. So we need to then start thinking about certain nutrients, certain minerals, dietary changes, supplement changes, and the lifestyle things, sleep, stress, etc., exercise, getting the bowels moving so that they can start to clear those chemicals and toxins and get well. So we're all exposed to chemicals and toxins daily. And if we're well, this is not to put the fear in everyone. I think we all know as practitioners, if people are healthy, they actually have a high tolerance to all of this. It's when they've got genetic susceptibilities or nutrient deficiencies, it's a problem. So our genes can influence our ability to break down chemicals, toxins, and balance oxidative stress, as I discussed. Our nutrition is a big factor, and our genes can influence our nutritional requirements. For example, maybe we need more vitamin B2 if we've got these SNPs, or we need more vitamin C if you've got changes in your glutathione transferases. And having the knowledge, and if you do have the ability to test, can help you provide a more personalised approach to manage those with a high chemical load and showing signs of chemical sensitivities.